I do apologize to some of our partners if it is now in your evening time. Maybe we have some New Zealand agent. It's now 7 o'clock in New Zealand. Yeah, but this is very hard to accommodate at a different time zone. Firstly, I need to thank Matt in the very early time in UK to conduct this training, very updated information to our partner. So ANZ agents now, explore a new opportunity, explore a new challenge, maybe I say, because Australian border being closed for some time, and we would like to know the other progress and the study group portfolio. Today, so we bring the UK visa training to our partners. Hello, can you mute? Yeah, can everyone mute? Yeah. I've seen some of very familiar names. Hi, Sarandra. How are you? How are you in Nepal?
Good. Everything is all good.
Good. Yeah. Oh, yeah. So many familiar names here. Yes. Maybe I just save my time to lead the time to Matt Johnson. So Matt Johnson is our UK compliance officer. He's based in lovely Brighton. Hi, Matt.
Hello. Yeah, it is very lovely this morning.
Yeah, so I just hand it over to you. I believe you apply a lot of insights to our partners. And if you guys have any questions, please just raise it. You can also type in. I will be able to alert Matt if any question relevant to what he just presented now. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you everyone for joining, especially those in New Zealand and Australia where it's particularly late in the day. But hopefully this will be a good session for you, give you some good information about the UK student visa route. So in the session this morning, I would just like to cover an overview of the UK student visa route. Have a look at the documents that students need to provide to be issued with a CAS document. Have a look at the English language requirements for being able to apply for a visa in the UK. Have a look at the finance requirements. We'll go over the credibility review. Can I get everyone to mute their microphones, please? There's a bit of feedback. Thank you very much. So the credibility interview as part of the UK VI visa application and the pre-CAS process that we run here at Study Group as part of our admissions process. We're going to have a look at the visa application itself, just have a look at some timescales and costings, the eligibility requirements for students to be able to make an application in the UK, particularly once they finish their pathway course and they're progressing on to their degree programs. Then have a quick look at the working rights that students can be assigned, and a quick look at the dependent routes if students are eligible to bring dependents to the UK, and then the forthcoming graduate route, which opens in about 4 weeks in the UK, and to see which students would be eligible for that. Okay, then so starting with just an overview of the student route and how it works and what it is. So to recruit and enroll international students, educational institutes such as Study Group, they have to have a student license to be able to sponsor international students. And there are different types of licenses and different types of educational sponsors. And Study Group is a higher education provider with a track record of compliance. And Study Group is registered with the Office for Students. As we go through the slides, there's a few benefits that will become apparent that Study Group has for its students in terms of being a higher education provider with a track record of compliance. Working rights, for example, and some benefits in terms of how we meet the English language requirements. And I'll point them out and as we go through the slides. It's just to note that to be issued with a student sponsor license, Study Group will have to be a genuine education provider that has acceptable educational quality standards, has to be considered eligible to carry out its sponsor licenseship duties, and it has to be suitable to hold the sponsor license.
Sorry, hi Matt. Hi Matt. Yeah. Those partner agents saying your slides is not showing. I think it's from Icha. I can see the slide is moving from my side. Can you see slides properly? Can everyone see slides properly?
Can see the slide. You can see the slide. The sound is quite echo.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Now it's okay. Sorry, Matt. Yeah. Please go.
Okay. There's one particular. I think someone has their microphone on and it's causing a lot of feedback. If we could just get everyone to mute their microphones.
Can you force?
Thank you very much.
Everyone? Matt?
Hello?
Hi, it's Andre here. Can you force mute everyone? Do you have that option?
Do I have that option?
I can, but I can see everyone seems to have their microphone mute. I think, from what I see, everyone has mute.
Okay, that's fine.
No worries. Thanks. Sorry, Matt.
No worries. So study group has 2 sponsor licenses. So we have one for our study group via International Study Centre Network, and we have one for our Bellerbys Colleges Network. These slides will be available after the session. I'll make them available for everyone on the call, so you'll be able to see these in more detail. So just a little bit of information about how the student route works. So it's what is known as a points-based immigration system, and students will need to get 70 points in order to be issued with a successfully issued with a visa. So
UK visa guideline.
Hello?
ये भाई मैं तो वहाँ से वेबसाइट से लिया है, वो है ना GST का वो इवेंट पेज, वहाँ से उठाया है.
Sorry, who was asking the question? It's not very clear, your voice. Who was asking the question? Can you repeat again? Or maybe can everyone type in your question, and when Matt finished, and we can do Q&A one by one. Can you guys all type in your question, please? Yes, Matt, I think we can move on.
Okay. So 70 points students need to be successfully granted a visa, student visa. They get 50 of those points for a valid CAS. Now, the valid CAS obviously is issued by a study group. They get 10 points for successfully meeting the financial requirements, which we'll go over a little bit later. We'll also go over the 10 points the student will need to meet the English language requirements. Now, in addition to those 70 points, many students will also have to go through the additional stage of a UKVI credibility interview. Now this is so the Home Office can make sure that students that are being recruited by educational sponsors in the UK are credible and genuine. So successful students are awarded a student visa which is only valid to study the specific course with the specific dates at the specific institute which is stated on the CAS statement. So once students if they are successfully granted a student visa and once they're in the UK, they can only study the course for which they have been sponsored. They would not be freely able to just change courses as they like. And there are 2 different types of student sponsorship. So there is just the general student, which is most students in the International Study Group Network, studying courses from International Foundation Year upwards. And there's child students for students studying GCSE, A-level and pre-foundation in our Bellerbys colleges. So a confirmation of acceptance of studies document, a CAS document, which I've referenced a couple of times already. It's just a virtual document. It's really a 14-digit virtual number that a student needs to have in order to apply for a student visa. So as one of the questions in the visa application, it will ask the student if they have a CAS number, if they have been sponsored by an educational institute, and they'll have to submit that number in support of the visa application. So no CAS number means no visa application. And a valid CAS is one that the student has to have the same details as is on their passport. It has to have been assigned no more than 6 months before the visa application. So we can't, study group wouldn't be able to issue CASs now, for example, for courses that start in 2022. And the CAS has to not have been withdrawn or cancelled by the student sponsor. So there are two study limits for studying in the UK on a student visa. These are the 2-year limit for courses below degree level. So that really affects our courses such as A-level, International Foundation Year and International Year 1 courses. And the 2-year limit is really designed to stop the so-called perpetual student, or to stop students that are just going from one course to another without progressing. So the 2-year limit is from a student's 18th birthday. So as soon as a student hits 18 years old, they will have a maximum of 2 years to be able to study courses under degree level on a student visa. So if students had other forms of sponsorship, or if they have other types of visas that they can study that, this is just on a student visa. There is an 11-month concession for students that have never studied on a student visa before and are in the UK and are applying for permission to study a 2-year course such as A-level. So in that instance, because the course itself is 2 years and the student needs a wrap-up period, both before and after, the strict application of the 2-year limit would prevent that student from being able to be granted a visa. So there is an 11-month concession to stop that happening. There is also a 5-year limit for students that are studying at degree level and above. And this is going to affect our International Year 1 ICAS courses and our pre-masters courses. So students have, once they are 18 years and over and they're studying at degree level or above, students have a maximum of 5 years to study on the student route in the UK. Now, again, there is an 11-month concession for this, where the strict application of the 5-year rule would perhaps stop the student finishing their 5th academic year of study in the UK. The study group, students studying with study group, because study group is a higher education provider with a track record of compliance, students studying or applying with us would benefit from us being able to have an 11-month concession for that student to be able to finish their course. There is no study limit at all for study above degree level. So if students are studying at master's level and above, so that's RQF 7. So any student that wants to study our pre-masters ICAS courses or our Huddersfield London masters courses, there are no study limits on that at all. So the student wouldn't have to go through a study limit check to make sure that they have enough time to study the course. So any student that applies for those courses will automatically have time. So the non-student visa route then, so we have our short-term study visa route. Now this is only for students that want to come to the UK between between 6 and 11 months and study an English language course. So short-term study students now is only for English language courses only between 6 and 11 months. There's the tier 1 route. So these are just other routes on the immigration points-based system in the UK. So there's the tier 1 for exceptional talent entrepreneurs and graduate entrepreneurs. There's the skilled worker route, used to be the tier 2 route. There's a tier 5 temporary migrant route. You can be a dependent of anybody that's on any immigration route in the UK. So you could be a student dependent, a tier 1 dependent, for example. And we'll go over dependents a little bit further on in the slides. Students can study on a visitor visa for up to 6 months. So students can, on a visitor visa, study any course in the UK for a maximum of 6 months. Students that are eligible for the EU settlement scheme, so any EU or EEA nationals that were resident in the UK before the 31st of December 2020 are eligible to apply for the EU settlement scheme, which will make them eligible to study in the UK. And for any eligible students that have a BNO passport, they can apply for the newly opened BNO visa route. So cash issuing then, so students must have a valid cash to apply for a visa, and as we went over earlier, that counts towards 50 points on that points-based system. Student needs 70. And the requirements for a CAS, when study group will issue a CAS, so the student will need an unconditional confirmation of an offer to study. They'll need to make some form of deposit. I think it's £7,235, £7,235, but it will depend on the course. Some courses are longer than others. Some shorter courses might have less deposit. Student must provide the academic documents, which is the sponsor study group is using to make the student an offer, the academic documents that have been assessed by the admissions team. Student must meet the English language requirements. So that means they usually have to provide a UKVI CELT or some kind of CELT equivalent, secure English language test. If applicable, the student will also need to meet 2 additional pre-CAS checks. So they'll need to pass a study group pre-CAS interview, and they'll also have to have a financial documents check as well. So for students applying from outside the UK, CASs can be issued 6 months in advance. That's because outside the UK, students can apply for their visa 6 months in advance. And for students that are inside the UK, CASs can be issued 3 months in advance before the course start date. And that's because in the UK, students can only apply for their student visa 3 months before the course start date. So the English language requirements then, so this is a further 10 points on the points-based system. And UKVI will accept the following secure English language test for a student to meet the English language requirements on the student route. So getting a secure English language test, a UKVI approved CELT, is the most traditional way of meeting the English language requirements. So approved CELTs are the IELTS, UKVI IELTS, the Pearson PTE Academic UKVI, the Language Cert International, the PSI services, so this is the Skills for English test, which is outside the UK only. And for students that are making an application inside the UK, they can use the Trinity College London CELT. So the table at the bottom of the screen there shows what the students would, the threshold that the student would need to hit depending on the level of study that they're applying for. So students applying for degree level and above will need B2. So for students that are applying for International Year 1 ICAS, for example, they would need to hit, they would need to have B2 English language requirement. So if they're using a CELT, they would need 5.5 in all components. If it was Pearson PTE Academic UKVI, they would need 59 in all components. For students studying under degree level, so those International Year 1 courses, International Foundation Year courses, students have to have an English language requirement of B1. So UKVI IELTS, that would be a 4 in all components. Pearson PTE would be 43 in all components. There are a number of ways in which the student can be exempt from CELT. So any student applying for a child student visa is automatically exempt from having to meet the English language requirements. Students who are nationals of a majority English-speaking country, so the USA, for example, nationals from the USA would not have to show that they meet the English language requirements. Students who have previously completed an academic qualification equivalent to a UK degree, which was taught in a majority English-speaking country, those students would not have to demonstrate that they meet the English language requirements. They would just have to provide their degree certificate, and also with a UK ENIC statement of comparability. So we'll go over what the statement of comparability is on the next slide. But in short, it's just a statement that confirms that a non-UK degree that a student has received is equivalent to a UK degree. Just further exemptions for students who have previously completed an academic qualification equivalent to a UK degree. which was taught in a non-majority English-speaking country, as long as the course was taught in English. Again, this must be confirmed by a statement of comparability from UK ENIC. And students who have successfully obtained an academic qualification from a UK university, which is bachelor's degree or above. So students perhaps applying for PMP courses who have done their bachelor's degree in a UK institution would also be exempt from having to meet the English language requirements. So that UK ENIC statement of comparability then, it's a statement that essentially, if a student has a qualification equivalent to a degree from another country, that say they have a degree from the USA or Canada, it would confirm that the student will need to have it confirmed that their qualification is the equivalent to a UK degree. And the way to do that is to send off and apply for the statement of comparability. It costs £49.50 plus VAT. And the student will need to submit their original academic certificate and the statement of comparability in support of their visa application. And further information can be found on the UK ENIC website. Again, these slides will be sent out after the presentation, so you'll be able to click on all these links. So further CELT exemptions for students that have already met the English language requirements in a previous application. There are a couple of conditions on this. So if the student, for example, is making an application to study an international foundation year program, and they have already met the English language requirements because they have previously made an application to study an international foundation year program, then the student can be exempt from having to meet the English language requirements again by what the UK VI will refer to as their immigration history. So the condition is that the student has to be making an application for the same level. So if the student has previously successfully applied for a visa to study international foundation year, and now the student is making an application to study at degree level, the student will have to meet the new English language requirements. This exemption only applies where the student is making an application to study at the same level. So it might be that the student has previously applied to study international foundation year, maybe they didn't complete the course, or they just want to do a new foundation course. If the student has already met the requirements in a previous application, then they'll be deemed to have met the requirements in their current application. And any student that has a GCSE A-level or Scottish Higher in English, so this has to be English literature or English language, and the qualification has to have been issued by a UK certified awarding body. And the student must have started these studies, so started their GCSE A-level Scottish Higher before they were 18 years old. So non-UK VI CELTs then, so these are students that are that don't have to use a UK VI approved CELT to meet the English language requirements. So students will meet the English language requirements if they are applying for a course of study at degree level or above, and they are sponsored by a higher education provider with a track record of compliance, which study group is, and study groups state on the CAS that they have assessed the student's English language ability and how they have assessed it. So I mentioned at the beginning that being a higher education provider with a track record of compliance has some benefits with the students that study with us. And one of those benefits is that for courses at degree level and above, the study group as a HEP with a track record of compliance can self-assess students' English language ability. This means that students don't have to have a UK VI CELT. They can use any of the listed non-UK VI CELTs there, and the sponsor can make a self-assessment, and that just has to be stated on the CAS. So the student can use an academic IELTS, TOEFL, a Cambridge ESOL, just a Pearson non-UK VI PT academic scores, Duolingo, except for our two Huddersfield campuses, and the Language Cert International. So the student will still need to meet the requirements for B2. They still have the sponsor still has to make sure that the student has met the requirements for the program that they are applying for. So in this case, it will only be for students B2 for degree level and above, but they don't have to have a UKVI CELT. So students on our English for pre-masters courses can also progress to their pre-masters course on the basis of their academic English scores without the need to take an additional UKVI approved CELT. Finance requirements then, so this is the final 10 points which the student needs to be awarded a student visa. And the student must show that they have enough funds to cover the outstanding course fees and the monthly living costs for the first academic year of their course. So this is up to a maximum of 9 months. So if a student is studying a degree course for 3 years, they will only need to show that they meet the finance requirements for the first academic year, which is the first 9 months of the course. If a student is studying a course for 6 months, then they will only need to show the finances for the full first year course. So it could be up to, if the course is between 6 and 7 months, then they will need to show that they have the finances for the remainder, for the whole of their course for the first year, plus the living costs for 7 months. The living costs are currently £1,334 for those students studying in London. To study group, that means students that are studying at Bellaby's London, Coventry, Huddersfield London, and Kingston ISC. And for all other students with study groups studying outside of London, so that's Bellaby's, Brighton, and all of the other ISCs that are not listed above, then that student will have to meet the living costs of £1,023, again, up to a maximum of 9 months. There are a few exemptions to students that for students having to show the finance requirements. So any students that are deemed low risk, so there's a list of nationalities there. When you click on the link, we'll bring up a list of nationalities that do not have to provide financial evidence in support of their visa application. And for students that are applying from within the UK, if they have been living in the UK with valid permission for more than 12 months, then they will be exempt from having to meet or show the finance requirements again. So the types of financial evidence that a student can use to meet the financial requirements. So it has to be an official financial or government sponsorship or grant, an official student loan from a government-sponsored loan company or a regulated student loan scheme. Student can obviously use their own money, personal savings. They can use money that is in the parent's name, provided that they provide a consent letter from the parents or the account holder. And the student can use money in a partner's name, but only where the partner is either making an application for entry clearance into the UK at the same time, or if that partner is already present in the UK. That's the only conditions on which a student can use a partner's finances in support of their visa application. So the types of evidence that are not accepted then are funds where the student cannot immediately access them. So things like overdrafts, pensions, stocks and shares, bank accounts that don't use electronic record keeping. So these will be banks that a UKVI cannot satisfactorily verify the account information that's on the bank statement, and accounts not regulated by the financial regulatory body in the country of application. So these are all checks that are carried out by our financial documents team. And if any of the documents or if any of the banks that are being submitted do not meet the requirements, then we'll have to, we won't be able to accept the financial evidence that the student has provided. We'll ask the student to provide an alternative bank statement. So financial documents, so most commonly students will use their own money or money that's held by a parent, and it will be in some kind of personal banking account. So the kind of evidence that the student will need to show is a bank statement, a building society passbook, a certificate of deposit if the student is relying on funds in a fixed deposit account, or a letter from the bank or building society which summarizes the account information for the student. So bank statement must confirm the date on which it was issued, on which the bank statement was issued. It must have the student's name, or it must have the account holder's name if the account holder is one or both of the parents. Obviously, it must bear the name of the bank or the building society. It has to show the funds available on the account, so it has to show the balance of the account, or if it's a transaction or a statement of account, it will need to show the running balance between two dates. And the bank statement must confirm the following. It must confirm that the funds have been held in the account for a consecutive period of 28 days up to the closing balance. So the required funds that the student has to show to meet the finance requirements, those funds have to have been held in the account or on the statement that the student is using for a minimum period of 28 days up until the closing balance. And then from the closing balance of the account, the student has 31 days in which that bank statement is valid to make a visa application. The students providing financial evidence in a parent's name must also provide proof of relationship. So they must provide evidence that they are related to the person named on the bank statement. And they must also provide a financial consent letter. So a consent letter signed by one or both of the parents, depending on who the account holder is, that gives the student permission to be able to use the funds in the account to study in the UK. So students are relying on a loan letter then for their finance requirements. So the loan letter itself must be dated no more than 6 months before the date of application. The loan must confirm that it is a student loan provided by either a relevant government or government-sponsored loan company, or the loan is part of an academic or educational loan scheme. And what this means is that students cannot withdraw from the bank, or they cannot get some kind of personal loan or any other kind of loan that they're relying on for their studies. It has to be an academic or educational loan, or a loan that's been approved as part of a government-sponsored student loan company. The loan letter must confirm that there are no conditions on the release of the loan funds other than a successful application to study. So any other conditions on the funds being released other than the student's successful application to study, and the loan will not be valid to support the visa application. Obviously, it must confirm the amount of the loan, and it must have the student's name on it. So the loan can only be in the student's name. It cannot be in the parent's name or anybody else's name. Funds have to be issued directly to the student. The letter has to be official stationery, so the loan just has to be on a headed paper. The letter just must confirm that the funds will be available to the student or paid directly to the student before they begin their course. So in terms of financial documents checks, so as I mentioned, we have a financial documents team that carry out checks for making sure the student is eligible to be issued a CAS. And we will carry out financial documents checks to any student applying to our ISCs, our International Study Centres, or our Bella Beach colleges, which are from the nationalities listed there on the screen. So Bangladesh, India, Iran, Pakistan, Nepal, and Vietnam. For any students applying to Kingston ICAS, so any student applying to Kingston as an ICAS, on an ICAS course, will have a financial documents check. And any student that has previously had a visa refusal based on financial documents. So if a student has received a visa refusal in the past because they have not met the requirements for the finances, then we will also make sure that that student has a financial documents check ahead of being issued a CAS. So the credibility interview then, so once students have been awarded their 70 points, some students may be invited to a credibility interview. So this is where the UKVI are really trying to assess whether or not the student is genuine. And by that, what they mean is that the student has the genuine intention of coming to the UK to study the course that they have applied for, successfully completing the course, and then either returning home or making a further application to study in the UK. So if a student is invited to a UK credibility interview, it would usually be after they have enrolled their biometrics. So once students have gone to their visa application centre. So the initial interview will be a video interview, perhaps by telephone, and it'll usually be with a member of staff that is based in the UK. If after the interview UKVI feel that they require further clarification, then they may ask the student to attend a second interview. And failure to attend the UKVI credibility interview without good reason is likely to result in a refusal. So preparing for the credibility interview then, it should take roughly 30 to 40 minutes. And students will be asked a range of questions about their application to study in the UK. Now, as I understand it, there is no set transcript that UKVI use, so they're free to ask the student any questions that they feel is necessary, any questions that they feel that they need to ask to ascertain that that student is credible and genuine. But the student is likely to be asked certain questions. So they are likely to be asked about their chosen institution, likely to be asked about their course details and the course they have applied for, how they intend to fund their studies. So this is not about the finance requirements. This is if a student is doing a 3 or 4 year course, for example, how they intend to fund their studies after the first year. And they'll also be asked about their future career plans. So why it is that they've made an application to study in the UK and how they hope to benefit in the future. So students will need to be able to demonstrate that they have successfully researched the different aspects of their course and be able to provide detailed responses to the questions that are being asked. So there are no trick questions. So students just must answer the questions as honestly as possible. So for example, if the student has a previous visa refusal, they would likely have to declare it in their application form and in their visa application. So the student should just be honest about any questions like that. And if they do have a previous refusal, then just declare it and explain why it was and when it was that they got that visa refusal. If a student attempts to cover up anything like that, or the UKVI feel that the student is not answering the questions honestly or they're being deceitful, then the student is likely to be refused. And as with financial documents checks, we have a student visa interviews team that offer precast interviews to help students both prepare for their credibility interviews, but also to give us confidence that we know that that student is likely to pass the credibility interview at the visa application stage. So as part of our precast checks, they're much like the financial documents checks. We will interview any students that are applying to any of our international study centres that are from the nationalities on the screen. So they're the same nationalities as the financial documents checks. We will also interview any students who have had a previous credibility refusal. So any student that has applied for a student visa before but has received a visa refusal because they failed the credibility interview, we will automatically interview those students to make sure that they're prepared. So students will be invited to book a precast interview only once they have paid their deposit. So that's the deposit of roughly £7,235. So once the student has a confirmed and enrolled booking with study group, then they will be eligible to make an appointment for a precast interview. The student must pass the interview to be approved for a CAS, and the students will be offered a maximum of 2 interviews per intake. So if a student is, for example, wanting to study International Foundation Year business course for Kingston for September 2021, then the student will have a maximum of 2 opportunities. We will interview the student twice in preparation for that. So if the student is not we don't feel the student is fully prepared, or if the student is likely to be refused after 2 interviews, then we cannot offer any further interviews. So just some sample questions then. Again, there is no set transcript that UKVI will use, and they may ask different questions, and they may ask more or less questions, but this is the areas in which the student really should be prepared to answer. So why the student has chosen the university that they have applied for, so considering the reasons why they have done that, what makes that institution more attractive than other institutions that they could have applied for, what facilities the university provides that will help them with their studies or their chosen course at that university, whether the student has meaningfully compared the university with other universities. So if the student has decided that they want to study in the UK, as they will have done, then what other institutions in the UK that student considered. So if the student is considering studying a business course, whether they considered studying that same business course at 2 or 3 different universities. So in order to best justify why they have chosen their university that they're applying for, it's important that the student is really able to compare and contrast that university with at least a couple of others. So the student should know about the course details that they're going to be studying. So why it is specifically that they chose that pathway course, why they felt they needed the pathway course, why they have chosen that particular subject, whether they considered any other types of courses at different institutions. So what information can the student give about the course? So the course content, things like the learning outcomes. So not just what modules that the student is going to study, but also what content within the modules. So they may be asked specifically, if the student says that one of the modules that they're going to study is organizational behavior as part of a business course, then they may be asked exactly what it is that they could be learning about, or they hope to learn about, or what the learning outcomes could be from that module. So it's just about the research that the student has done into their course. So how does the course that they're applying for, if it's relatable to any previous studies that the student has done in their home country? And for example, is the student continuing a business course that they've from business studies that they've done in their home country? If the student is doing a completely different course, then just being able to justify why they've chosen and changed subject stream. If the student has any gap in their studies, again, this is not an issue, but the student will likely just need to justify that. So if a student has been working for a couple of years, for example, and they've been out of education, then they'll just need to provide a justification as to why it is that they've been out of education for a couple of years, why it is that they've decided that they're going to drop their work and continue their studies. So future career plans, this is a really important one with UKVI, because the costs of studying in the UK really are somewhere between sort of £20,000 and £25,000 a year, including the course fees and living costs. This is how they will work it out. So depending on the type of course that you're doing and whereabouts in the UK that you're living, if you're inside or outside London, it's roughly £20,000 to £25,000. So a student studying a 3 or 4 year course, they could be looking at a financial commitment over the whole course of somewhere between £75,000 and £100,000. Now, UKVI will expect students to know, therefore, what they hope to gain or what they expect to be able to achieve after they graduate in terms of a future career. So how they hope to start to recoup those costs of studying in terms of future expected salary, what job that student would like to do in the future, what industries the student would like to work for, and just for the student to have thought about their future career. The student doesn't have to have sort of any pre-employment contract lined up. They don't need to know exactly what job they're going into, but the UKVI will expect the students who have at least thought about their career options and know why it is that they need to come to the UK to enhance their career possibilities. And obviously the student should be prepared to justify why it is that they come to the UK to study. So why the student has decided not to study in their home country, why they've decided not to study in other English-speaking countries. So again, it's just a little bit of comparison, making sure that the student is able to fully justify why the UK is the best choice for them to come and study. How will you fund your studies? So this is an increasingly important line of questioning with UKVI. Again, this is separate from the finance requirements. So if the student meets the financial requirements and is therefore awarded their 10 points on the points-based system, this is something separate. So what the UKVI are really getting at here is if the student is coming to study an international foundation year, followed by a 3-year degree course, then that's a 4-year commitment to studying in the UK. So the questions will be, how do they intend to fund those studies after the first year? So the student just should have a good idea about their financial outlay for the whole course, or the full duration of their studies in the UK. So that would include knowing who is going to fund their studies, if that's the parents or the father, how much the salary is, so what salary the father has to be able to afford to fund those studies, what savings the parents have, whether the parents have any other forms of income. So it might be that their salary itself is not particularly high or suggestive that they could afford to fund a student in the UK for 3 years. But it might be that they have other incomings from perhaps rented properties or agricultural lands and things like that. So the student doesn't have to account for every single penny. So the UKVI will not say your studies in the UK are going to cost £75,000, and they're not going to ask the student for account for every single last pound, but they will want an idea that that studying in the UK is affordable for this student. If they think that the student cannot afford to study in the UK for the full duration of their course, then they will likely think that they have no option other than to refuse the student. And again, with previous visa applications, if the student does have a previous visa application, then it's important that they just disclose it both in the visa application form itself, but then again when asked by the interviewing officer. So common concerns then, so these are the concerns that we look out for when we're doing the precast interviews. So the biggest concern really is that students just haven't done enough research into their study plan in the UK. So it might be that the student is studying at Kingston, and when asked about Kingston University, they're just not able to provide enough information, or the student's not able to provide enough information that would suggest that they really have thought about and are excited about coming to study at Kingston University, for example. So just things like not providing specific facilities that the university offers for their chosen course. So students might say that they've chosen their university because of the great teaching and great facilities, 24-hour library, the sports clubs, the CAFs, the gyms, and things like that. Now, this is all true. The university might provide those things, but every university provides those things. So the UKVI will not see those as reasons as why the student has chosen their university specifically. Students that are basing their answers on rankings or location, but they give sort of little specific detail apart from this. So, for example, a student might say that they've chosen to study at Kingston because it has a good ranking and of the universities that they considered, Kingston has the best ranking. So it might be ranked in the top 50, whereas other universities they considered perhaps weren't ranked quite so highly. Now, again, this might be true, but UKVI don't really like answers that are based specifically on ranking, just because if you're basing it on ranking and ranking is so important to you, there's always going to be a university that's ranked slightly higher. So if you're saying that you chose Kingston because it's ranked in the top 50, then they'll say, well, why didn't you consider universities that were perhaps ranked in the top 40? So if the student knows the ranking, then it's absolutely fine to mention it, but it shouldn't be the student's main reason for having chosen that university. So students not providing facilities and services that are specific. So if a student is wanting to study business studies at Kingston, for example, they should really know a little bit about the business school, be able to provide information about the facilities that will be provided that will help them with their studies. Perhaps the university offers some work experience or internships that will in turn help them with their career prospects. So students should know really a little bit about that. So a lack of specific information or evidence about why this university is the best choice for them. Again, this really comes from sort of an inability to be able to compare and contrast both universities and courses with in different places. So if a student hasn't considered any other universities, for example, it's really difficult for that student then to be able to explain that their chosen university is going to be the best choice for them. So students really should be able to have a little bit of detail and some information about other universities, so then they can say, well, I considered these three, but I chose this one because of X, Y, and Z. Little or no research of other universities yet. Generic reasons for choosing the university over other universities. So again, the reasons for choosing one university over another should be quite solid. Students should have a really good idea of why it is that they're choosing their chosen university, with some good reference to the facilities and what they hope to gain. Perhaps the course detail itself is different, rather than just relying on rankings and location. So again, it's obvious that the student should have some good information about their course, be able to answer questions about the modules, the course content, different aspects of perhaps the passing grade, etc. Future career plans, so I mentioned that this was an important one, so this is just making sure that students are able to justify why it is that they're coming to study for a degree in the UK and where they hope that that degree will get them in the future after they graduate. So students should be able to demonstrate that they've done some research and that their degree in the UK will open up a certain amount of opportunities for them. Should have a good idea of perhaps what job or what kind of job industry they would like to go into, perhaps have an idea of what companies they would like to work for, what their expected starting salary is going to be, that their expected starting salary is sort of only attainable if they come to the UK to get the degree. If the student is not able to answer questions about their future career plans, if they haven't really thought about it, or they don't know what they want to do, or they haven't researched it yet because it's too far away in the future, then that could undermine their credibility with UKVI. The UKVI might just think that the student is making a massive financial commitment and they don't actually know where it hopes to get them in the future. So they may receive a refusal on that basis. So study gaps, as I mentioned, study gaps are fine. The student just really has to be able to justify it. So if a student has a lengthy study gap and is a bit coy about it and doesn't really provide any information for what they were doing during that time, then UKVI, again, it just might undermine the student's credibility. And the student should be able to justify why they come to the UK. So as with the universities, so students should at least have thought or know some information about other English-speaking countries, just so that they can compare and contrast and say that perhaps they considered Australia and New Zealand and the USA, but they chose the UK because perhaps the course fees were more affordable, because the courses were shorter, etc. So it's not a good idea if the student attends the credibility interview and says that they haven't considered any other countries, because then they're going to be in a difficult situation when it comes to explaining why it is that they feel that the UK is the best destination for them to study. And lastly, accommodation. So students, if they haven't booked accommodation, should just have some accommodation options that they know about. So perhaps a couple of university accommodations that they know the rough costing, so they've got an idea of how much the living expenses in the UK are going to be per month, which will account for their rent, how far away they intend to live from the International Study Centre. If the student's living privately and not on university or managed accommodation, are they able to provide the address and the postcode? Are they able to explain why it is that they've chosen to live privately? So just making sure that the student is able to answer some questions about accommodation. And of course, as I mentioned, the funding is really important. So making sure that when the students are asked about funding, that they're able to provide some kind of financial outlay with details around whoever is funding them details around their salary, any other income, any savings that they have, any money that will be used to help fund that student study in the UK. The student really just wants to avoid being able to, not if they're in a situation where they're saying that they just don't know how their studies are going to be funded, or that they don't know how much money they have. Again, that, or if the UKVI don't think the student has enough money to finish the course that they're applying for, then they're highly likely to be refused just on that basis alone. I won't go through these, but there's just a checklist of the do's and don'ts that students should be aware of when they're both preparing for the precast interview and the credibility interview. Okay, so the student visa application then. So students must start preparing their visa application and submit it as soon as possible. As already mentioned, outside the UK, students can make that visa application 6 months before the course start date. And in the UK, that time will be 3 months before the course start date. If you're applying to an international study centre that has an ACL code, then the ACL code will be stated on the CAS document, and then the student can put that into their visa application so that their BRP card will be delivered to the International Study Centre, and that they can collect it from the centre rather than the post office. So for any student that applies for a visa outside the UK, the default address will be the closest post office to the student's residential address once they get to the UK. An ACL, an alternative collection location, will just enable that student to have it redirected to their international study centre instead. So if the student is not studying at a centre that is registered as an ACL, if they're not able to have BRPs redirected to their place of study, they'll just collect them from the post office. So documents for submission then, so this is similar to the documents that the admissions would have requested for CAS issuance. So current passport or other valid travel document. Obviously the student will need a valid CAS, or rather that 14-digit CAS number. Any evidence of any qualifications specified on the CAS. So these are the academic qualifications and certificates. Evidence of any English language requirements, so the CEL, or if the student is CEL exempt, or if they're meeting the English language requirements through the non-CEL route, if the student's being self-assessed. Evidence of finances, so the financial document that would have been hopefully approved by the financial documents team, and then the students will have 31 days from the date of the bank statement to then make a visa application. If applicable, certain nationalities will have to have a TB certificate, a valid TB certificate. And for more information about what students will need, then you can just click on the link at the bottom of the screen. So processing times outside the UK for a standard application, you're looking for up to 3 weeks. So I think it's 15 days, 3 working weeks. Standard processing time for application inside the UK is 8 weeks, slightly longer, but students are able to remain in the UK once they have made their application. If the student would like a faster decision, then there are 2 priority services that the student can use, and they will just have to check their visa application centre to see which of these services are offered. So there's a priority service which will return a decision within 5 working days. So this is 5 working days from the point at which the student goes to the visa application centre and registers their biometrics. So it's not 5 working days from within the online submission. It's 5 working days from the registering of biometrics at the visa application centre. And then there's a super priority service which will return a decision within 24 hours. So again, this is 24 hours within student registering biometrics at the visa application centre. So if the UKVI cannot meet the priority service deadlines, and then they'll let the student know, and then the student will be refunded the fee for which they have paid for that priority service. So those fees are £348 standard application fee outside the UK, an additional £220 if the student chooses to use the priority service, and it will be an additional £956, so that's additional to the 348 if the student wants to use the super priority service. And inside the UK, standard application is 475, and then an additional 500 or 800 depending on whether you want to use the priority or super priority service. So the short-term study visa, so that's for students that want to study English language courses between 6 and 11 months. That's £186 for students that want to study any course for up to 6 months on a visitor visa, will have to pay £95. And for students that are eligible, the students from Kuwait, Oman, Qatar, and the United Arab Emirates, they can get an electronic visa waiver for £30. So the immigration health surcharge, so this is a payment that is applicable at the point of application, so the point at which the student makes their visa application online. They will be eligible to pay for the immigration health surcharge for their full course. And the payment is applicable for any course of longer than 6 months, or for any length of time if that student is applying from inside the UK. So the health surcharge is £470 a year, and the student will pay half of the yearly amount if the application includes part of the year that is less than 6 months. So let's say, for example, the student is studying a course of 13 to 17 months. The students will be charged at 1.5 times 470. So they'll pay an immigration health surcharge of £705. If the student is studying for more than for part of a year that is more than 6 months, so if they're studying for 18 months, up to 23 months, for example, the students will be eligible for 2 years of the immigration health surcharge. Students applying for a visitor visa do not need to pay the health surcharge, and more information about the health surcharge is available at the link at the bottom of the screen. So eligibility to apply within the UK. So this is applicable for students that will be coming to the UK and they'll study their pathway course, let's say International Foundation year, and then they'll need to make an application to study their following course, their progression course for which they, the degree course for which they really want to come to the UK and study. So students can make that application in the UK if they meet a couple of requirements. The first one is the academic progression requirements. So this rule is in place to ensure that students are progressing academically if they wish to study a further course in the UK. So students who meet the academic progression requirements are eligible to make their next visa application in the UK. And the rule is really that the student has to be making an application to study at a higher level than their previous course, or for which they were previously offered a visa grant. Let's say, for example, that the student was studying International Foundation year, and so they're doing RQF3. To meet the academic progression requirements, the student would then have to make an application for a course of higher than RQF3. If the student would want to make an application for a second International Foundation year, they would not make the academic progression requirements because they would not be studying at a course at a higher level. And that student would have to leave the UK and make their application from outside the UK in their home country. For students applying outside the UK, the academic progression requirements do not apply. And the second requirement, the second condition, is that the student will have to have successfully completed the course of study for which they were previously granted a Tier 4 or student visa. So if a student is making an application to study their degree program in the UK, they will need to have successfully completed the course of study for which they were previously granted a student visa. So for example, if a student is going from International Foundation year to the degree program, they will need to have successfully completed the International Foundation year. This means that they would have gained the qualification for which they were applying for. So if the student dropped out halfway through the course and they didn't complete their course, they would not be eligible to then apply, even though they would be applying to study at a higher level. They wouldn't meet the requirements based on the fact that they had not completed the course. And the other rule is that students making an application to study, making an application for a new visa in the UK, and the new course start date must be no more than 28 days from the current expiry date of their visa. So that means that if the student, if they're in the UK studying something like an international foundation year, for example, they will need to make they'll need to make their application for their new course, their new visa, obviously before their previous visa expires, but then the new course must begin no later than 28 days after the current visa expires. So if the student's visa expires in, let's say, September this year, and their new course starts in September 21st, that will be the degree course, then the student would be eligible to apply from the UK as long as they submit that application before their current visa expires. If the student's visa was to expire on the 1st of August 2021, if they're currently studying international foundation year, their visa expires August the 1st, 2021, but their new course does not start until the 21st of September 2021, then the student would not meet the eligibility requirements to be able to apply within the UK, because their course starts after 28 days within the visa expiry period. So students in that situation would have to leave the UK and then make an application for entry clearance. So working rights, so again, as I mentioned at the beginning, study group was a higher education provider with a track record of compliance, and this comes with a few benefits for the students. And one of these benefits is that the students that study with us will have working rights granted with their visa. So the working rights are worked out as in the table. So students that are studying at degree level and above will have 20 hours per week. So these are the students that will be doing International Year 1 ICAS, pre-masters, any master's courses, and students studying at below degree level. So International Foundation Year and International Year 1, A level, for example, they will have 10 hours per week during term time. All students are eligible for full-time working hours outside of term time, so that's 40 hours per week. Students have to be enrolled on a full-time course to be eligible for working rights, so any students on a part-time course are not eligible. Students are only eligible to work from the age of 16. The working hours applies to all paid and unpaid work. So if the student is doing unpaid work, they are still only eligible to work for the amount of hours that is granted with their visa. So below degree level 10 hours and above degree level and above 20 hours. Students working for more than one company or organization must not exceed the combined total of hours. So if a student has a couple of part-time jobs, the student is doing pre-masters, for example, and they have 2 part-time jobs of 10 hours per week, that would be the maximum that they would be unable to work. So they're not able to work 20 hours a week per company or per job. It's 20 hours a week total. And again, the students are able to work full-time hours in the holiday periods. There's some information about student dependents then, and when and where students are valid to bring dependents to the UK. So the students that are eligible to bring dependents to the UK, so the student must be a full-time student on a postgraduate course, that's RQF level 7 or above, and the course must be for a period of 9 months or longer. So in terms of study group students, this really only applies to our PMP ICAS students and our Huddersfield London Masters courses. So any student, any government-sponsored student on a course of 6 months or longer, or any student that has permission on the doctoral extension scheme. So who could be considered a dependent? So that would be the husband, wife, or civil partner of the student, an unmarried partner of the student, or any child under the age of 18. Proof of relationship. So in support of the application for being a dependent, the dependent will have to provide the marriage or civil partner certificate, which proves the relationship between them and the main applicant. And if it's the child that's applying, child under the age of 18, obviously there'll have to be a birth certificate, which proves the relationship between the student and the dependent. So an application to be a partner or a child of a student must meet the following requirements. So obviously the dependent has to pay the application and the immigration health surcharge fees. They must register the biometrics. They must show that they have sufficiently proved the relationship between themselves and the main applicant, the student. And they must meet the financial requirements as for a dependent. So dependent partners and dependent children are not required to apply at the same time as the student. So if the student is studying a master's course in the UK for 1 year, for example, the student may go to the UK first, and then the dependent may decide to apply at a later date. So conditions on the student dependents. So dependents are able to work. They will be permitted to study. They will be required to register with the police if applicable. They will not have access to public funds, and they will not be able to work as a sports person or sports coach. So just the last final slides then on the graduate route, which opens up on 1st of July, so just in about 4 weeks' time, 1st of July 2021. And the graduate route and the eligibility requirements around the graduate route are really quite simple. So it will just enable international students to remain in the UK and work and look for work for a period of 2 years after they have completed their studies. So the student doesn't need sponsorship from a company or organization or any offer of work. The graduate route is something that, as long as the student has successfully completed their degree program and they're eligible for the graduate route, it's something that they can just apply for. So the graduate route has no minimum salary requirements and there's no cap on numbers. So students are really able to be quite flexible, and they can go from one job to another and kind of develop their career as required. The graduate route must be applied for from within the UK, so students have to remain within the UK after their studies and apply for the graduate route. Students cannot apply from outside the UK in their home country. Students must have valid student or Tier 4 permission at the time of application. And the student cannot switch from the graduate route to any other type of visa. So you cannot make once you're on the graduate route, you would not be able to make another application to study as a student in the UK, for example. You wouldn't be able to switch to the skilled worker route. You just have to complete your time on the graduate route. And no previous graduate route or doctorate extension scheme permission. So students must have successfully completed an undergraduate, postgraduate, or other eligible qualification and a higher education provider with a track record of compliance. The student must confirm, the sponsor must confirm, to the Home Office that the student has successfully completed the course. The qualification must be the same one for which the CAS was issued. So if a student is applying for a master's in business, then that has to be the qualification that they gain at the end of their studies. Students must have been in the UK when they apply for the graduate scheme, and if the course is longer than 12 months, less than 12 months, the course must have been fully studied in the UK. So for a course longer than 12 months, the student must have spent at least 12 months in the UK studying that course. Obviously, with online studying at the moment and blended delivery, there is a couple of COVID concessions. So for students that are studying online at the moment, for students that started their course in 2020, September 2020, the last 12 months or less, they must have entered the UK for the first time by the 21st of June 2021. So the students must be in the UK by that date to be eligible to apply for the graduate route when it opens. Or if the student started their studies in January or February 2021, then they must be in the UK by the 27th of September 2021 to be eligible to apply for the graduate route when their studies are completed. In terms of the graduate route, at the moment, the only students that study group have that will be eligible for that are the London Huddersfield Masters courses, which started on the 1st of February, and they will complete at the end of January 2022. So the first cohort of students that study group have that will be eligible for the graduate route will be those graduating in January, February 2022. And of course, those students that are, if they are still currently studying online, they will have to be in the UK by the 27th of September 2021. Applicants are not required to meet any English language requirements or finance requirements, and this is because they would have already met the English language and finance requirements when they applied for their student route, student visa. If students have a government scholarship, they need sponsoring body's permission to be able to apply for the graduate route. The application fee is £700. The immigration house surcharge is £1,248 for 2 years. The graduate route does not permit of any new dependents. And what that means is if a student is eligible to bring dependents, so let's say they studied a master's course, for example, and they decided not to bring any dependents, then once they apply for the graduate route, they're no longer eligible for dependents to come to the UK. If a student is studying a master's course and they did bring a dependent to the UK, then that dependent would be able to extend their leave at the point at which the student made an application for the graduate route. So the graduate route is not a route to settlement. And as part of the if students are on the graduate route, they can engage in supplementary studies such as sort of language courses or evening courses, but they would not be able to study anything that would usually require student sponsorship or would usually require a CAS. So students would not be able to complete a degree program and then apply for the graduate route and then apply for a master's course. So that master's course would require student sponsorship rather than the graduate route. And that is the end of the slides. So just got a few email addresses on the screen there. So any visa related queries can go to visaquestions@studygroup.com. Financial documents check. So this is where students are actually sending their financial documents to be checked in preparation for a CAS, can be sent to financialdocuments@studygroup.com. And the questions about the pre-CAS interview or eligibility can be made via student visa interviews@studygroup.com. Thank you everyone for listening. I'm gonna have a look through the chat now and see if there's any questions, and I'll open it up also to anybody that wants to shout out any questions.
Yeah, Matt, thanks so much for this comprehensive information. I like your slides called the common concerns. I think in that slide, I have pretty much covered some of the questions, and it's a lot of good questions we can also learn from the slides. And one of the questions raised first is about the PTE comparison. So PTE and IELTS comparison. Do you have a chat for the PTE and IELTS comparison? I think it's in your slides, is it?
What the combination? Sorry, I'm trying to find the question.
Yeah, the question raised by Ichihad is asking about, I guess, is like PTE and the IELTS. I mean, how PTE converted to IELTS.
Okay, so I'll just go back because it had the table.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's somewhere showing.
So the way it converts into IELTS is so they're both, let's say we're talking about the secure English language test. So
yeah, here we go.
IELTS is scored in bands and goes from kind of 3 and then goes up 0.5 until I think the highest score that a student can get is 9. And to meet so it's got what? So for undergraduate and postgraduate, the student would need to meet the same English language requirements. So they would need to meet B2, and so that would be a 5.5 in IELTS, and it would be a 59 in Pearson PTE. So when a student takes a secure English language test, there's 4 components: so reading, writing, speaking, and listening. So in IELTS, the student would have to hit 5.5 in all components, and in Pearson PTE, that student would need to meet 59 in all components.
Yeah, so this is B1, B2 is the visa requirement to English. So of course, university in terms of undergraduate and postgraduate, they will have a different cutoff in terms of PTE. Do I understand correctly?
Yeah, so I'll just explain. B1 is below degree level. So we're looking at courses such as International Foundation Year, International Year 1 and A-level, things like that. And B2 is degree level and above. So postgraduate and undergraduate are the same because they're both grouped together as degree level and above. So for those students that are applying for postgraduate and undergraduate courses, they can also meet the requirements via one of the non-UKVI CELTs. But for students studying at undergraduate or postgraduate level, they will have to meet the minimum requirements of B2, which is a 5.5 for IELTS or a 59 for Pearson PTE. Now, these are the UKVI requirements, English requirements for being able to meet the English language requirements to hit, to be granted a visa. So it might be that the specific course that the student is applying for has a higher English language requirement than the UKVI requirements. So, for example, students in some courses, perhaps in some of our ISCs, the entry requirements for pre-masters or the entry requirements for the perhaps Huddersfield London, it might be slightly higher than 5.5, but 5.5 are the UKVI requirements to be able to meet the English language requirements to be eligible for a visa. So it might be that students can meet the UKVI requirements with a CELT, so they could meet the student might have a UKVI IELTS of 5.5 in all components, in which case they have a valid B2 score, but they meet the actual course requirements perhaps with just an academic IELTS, because their academic IELTS they may have taken more recently, it has a slightly higher score.
Yeah, that's very clear. And we have a question from Ritu. Asking about this change will be from January intake, but September intake, we need to continue with current system. I believe the system referred to is the point-based system. Is Ritu still here?
So the points-based system has been in since Yes, yeah, so the points-based system has been in since the 5th of October 2020. So this is that's just how UKVI work it out. That's just how they exchange documents for points, and then the student has to be awarded points to be able to successfully be granted a visa.
Okay, so it's from 1st of October 2020.
Yeah, so this is already in terms of the points-based system. This is already in place.
Okay, then in the September intake, it will remain as current system, right? It will remain unchanged if it was September intake, that before 1st of October.
Do you mean last September?
Last September, oh yes, 2020 is the last year. Yeah. Sorry, I messed up. Yeah, I'm not sure because this question was raised by Ritu Pajura. Hi, Ritu Pajura, are you still here? Can you clarify your questions? Ritu Rajuta.
I can't see the question, so it might be.
Yeah, she asked. Yeah, she sent to me privately. the words you quote is these changes will be from January intake, right? For September, we need to continue with current system. That's, yeah, exactly what typed.
I'm not sure what, so all the things that I went over in the slide, apart from the graduate route, which doesn't open for until the 1st of July, they're currently in place now.
Okay, yeah, sure. Yeah, let's move to the next question because yeah, we have another question. I believe it has been answered in your latest slides. Is asking about the study gap between undergraduate and postgraduate. And I remember you indicated as long as there was a good justified reason, it's explainable. It's okay to have a gap between undergraduate and postgraduate, right?
Yeah, especially if the student is doing something that's, if they're working, for example, and the student is able to explain perhaps that they've been working in their job for a couple of years and they feel that they're not eligible for progression because they don't have the right academic qualifications, and so therefore they've decided to make an application to study in the UK to enhance their career prospects. That's absolutely fine. Or if the student's doing something else, if they've been working on their English language, trying to improve their English language so they can make an application to study abroad. It becomes more problematic if the student hasn't really been doing anything, and then it's not really clear why the student has all of a sudden decided to return to studying, or why if the student hasn't been doing anything, why they've decided to return to studying now when they could have done it perhaps 2 or 3 years ago.
Cool, thanks. Yeah. We have a question from Josephine from our partner manager. She's asking, can a student from Iran, Syria, and some sanctioned countries apply to study in UK? Because we are Australian based. For Australia visa requirement, we cannot take application from the sanctioned country. Is the same rule apply to United Kingdom?
No, so we accept applications from Iran and Syria.
Oh, more friendly, huh?
Yeah.
Good. Yeah. So another question from Melinda. She's is asking, can I know whether pre-master is a RQF level 7 program?
So pre-masters is RQF level 6. But
level 6.
If the student is doing pre-masters ICAS, so that means that they're having an integrated CAS for both the pre-masters and the master's course, then the qualification will be issued at level 7, because it will be the exit qualification. So for students pre-masters, if you're just studying pre-masters, it's level 6. If you're doing pre-masters ICAS, it's level 7. And then in regards to the second part of the question about dependents, the student would only be able to take the dependent if they're studying pre-masters ICAS.
Yeah, so this, the second question you also answered. Yeah, and the next one is Rajit. Yeah, it says, I think we couldn't get a combined CAS for ones who starting international year 1 in September intake. And I think can get a combined CAS for those who started in January intake. Yeah, Matt, did you see the question?
I can see the question. Yeah, I'm not really.
Yeah, I not really understand.
Yeah, so we only have 4 centres at the moment that issue that we have ICAS offerings with, which is Huddersfield, Coventry, Huddersfield, Royal Holloway, LGMU, and Kingston. But they are open for international year 1 ICAS in September. So
Rajesh, September is okay.
If the student has been rejected, if you mean that if the student has been rejected or if the student is not being offered an ICAS for September, then I suppose it depends on the reason, but then they could apply again for the January intake, if that is the question.
Yeah, next one from Rebecca, asking post-study work visa PSW is another name for graduate route, or are there different requirements?
Yeah, the post-study work visa is the graduate route.
Okay, so if there was another question followed. So if a student give a university placement test, where the field 3 English requirement for visa?
I'm not entirely sure what the placement test is, but I think in terms of meeting the English language requirements, it's likely going to be a no, because the student will need to take some test, whether it's just an academic IELTS or an academic Pearson PTE, which is assessed against those 4 components and then is converted into a band score. So whether that's B1 or B2, I'm not sure if the university placement test is going to be able to do that. So in terms of meeting the English language requirements for a visa, I don't think the student's going to, they might meet the entry requirements for their course, but I don't then, with the placement test, they're not going to meet the English language requirements for a visa.
That lots of our partners require the presentation slides, so no worries, rest assured, we will surely sending a copy of these slides to you all. So just as everyone here. And I think we have one more question from Rebate Nathan. Are there any specification for getting document attested? I think it's mean for verified copy, right? Are there any requirement for the document verified? Is that question asked?
So I can't think of any specific documents that would have to be attested in support of the visa application. But the documents that are submitted for the visa application have to be originals. So for example, the student is giving their bank statements or their academic qualifications, and they're sending their birth certificates in and their translations of birth certificates. They have to be original documents. But they wouldn't have to be attested. Anything that would need to be attested would be flagged when the student goes through the admissions route. So if a student is providing study group with any documents that need attesting, then it would be flagged as part of that process.
All right. I think this is end of the question for now. Actually, your slides, your presentation, it contains a lot of information. Yeah, I tried to ask a couple of questions, but I can see it's all answered in the later slides. Yeah, so that's why I received a lot of message privately or in the group chat, ask me about a copy. So don't worry, everyone. We'll sure send it to you all.